The Sanguinor. I am one of the few, one of the very few. For when it arrives, it is always at the crux point, when the blood is high, the stakes against us. Impossible odds, certain defeat our fate. Then, and only then, will it deign to appear. I remember it so well that night. It is scorched onto my soul, an everlasting after-image, as if one has stared too deeply into a fire, and its light is burnt onto the back of the retinas. I can still see it whenever I close my eyes. I know why, of course. For we made a pact, he and I. A dire and doleful pact. I have told no one, not even the chaplaincy. For I fathom it thus, despite being so ardent in the obeisance to every tenet and rule of our chapter. It is not their business. For the chaplains speak with the authority of those who have been anointed. They are the will of the Emperor made manifest. But they are mere men, Astartes, angels of death, aye, but men. This mandate, it comes from above them. It comes directly from the son of the Emperor, from our Primarch himself, in the form of his herald. And the presence of the sanguinary guard, those who have arrived so recently, to not only represent what is brightest and best in our chapter, to make certain I do not err, but they are here to defend me. For I am now a lord of angels. I, Rubrio Massaro, am the lord of a company of the blood. It is I who these exemplars now guard, ready to lay down their lives for the continuation of mine own. It is a great weight, but more than this. When I catch one out of the corner of my eye, forever lingering around the edges of my command, my presence, it is then that for a mere fleeting second I can feel him, can see him again. It is in the reflection of the light from their armor when they passed under the most powerful lumens. It is their grace. He is like them. But the difference is in orders of magnitude. I remember that night. We were beaten, but we refused to lay down and admit it. It was against our most bitter enemies, our adversaries of old. When we see them, when we meet them on the field of battle with bolter and chainsword in hand, the red rage rises, the black beckons. They were the sons of Horus, now the Black Legion. Yet in them is the echo of the presence of their sire, just as we are the echo of the Golden Angel. They are his sons, the progeny of he who slew our Lord, our Father. And when we face them, it is few who do not see the shifting lights, the darkening corridors. The horror screamed from the very walls of the vengeful spirit. And it was no different that night. I was a battle-line brother then, had always been the receptacle of not only my own rage, but that of my brother too. Yet that night my rage near unmanned me, near killed me. It was always something that kept me going, making me push on, the very soul of my brother leading me on to the greater service of my lord, the angel. He always helped me to control myself, to remember who I was, to know that this rage was a thing that would master me if I were to let it gain control for even a second. And how close I was. Like all of us, teetering on the edge of slipping into the black rage. It was when our captain, Barobiel, fell, his head struck off his shoulders by the champion of the Golden Legion. They laughed. They kicked it around the ground. And I cannot describe, I will not describe, what they were doing to his carcass as we all watched on. A growing, feral growl echoed around the square as the rage ripped through us. Some stood from their positions and tore off their helmets, screaming their rage at the sacrilege. I was amongst them. I wished for vengeance, wished for blood. But if we had all charged in as we were, we would have been gunned down with ease. The Black Legion are the greatest of all of the Chaos Forces, the traitor Astartes. How I hate to admit that, but it is irrefutable. Had we gone forth at them in this state, we would all have perished immediately. But then it happened. A golden light descended from the skies. It did not fall like a lightning bolt. It did not crash into the ground like a meteor, as so many reports have stated before. No. This time, he slowly dropped down in front of us all. The fire from the Black Legion broke on his armor like rain. Nothing penetrated. And his light, it was so dazzling in its intensity, yet all of us of the blood could view its very center without wincing, without discomfort. He was beautiful. He was dressed in the finest and most ancient of power armor, his wings gloriously floating out from his back in perfect symmetry, as were our father's, the true angel. And it was so hard to discern the difference, for he was hope and glory given form. He was the will of the Emperor and the angel reborn. The light from his wings, his presence, had bathed us all. It calmed us, brought us back from the very brink. But then it suffused us with purpose, with passion, with grace. We advanced all right, but we did so with alacrity and agility, with full awareness, with the ability to strategize and avoid the worst of the enemy fire. And we hit them as he finally displayed his true power. The Sanguinor, its golden aura risen for all to see, then sped towards the Black Legion champion, straight towards his Terminator guard. And he moved so swiftly, with such a pace that few of their Stormbolter shot even hit him. He hit their lines and tore through the tactical dreadnought armor as if it were paper, his sword in carmine drawing a toll of blood from our foes. His duel with the champion was brutally efficient, yet a spectacle. For he toyed with the champion, blocking every strike, pushing him back, but never dealing the death blow until all of their ward band had seen how pathetically outmatched their master was. And with each backstep of the champion of evil, with each of his strikes that were contemptuously batted aside, the enemy lost the verve and vim for battle. When his head slid from his shoulders and bounced thrice on the floor to roll to a stop, the last will of the Black Legion broke, and they fled. We harried them, and drove them before us, but we could never stop all of them escaping to their dropships. For when I looked across the field of battle, I saw that only I and one other now lived. The Sanguinor had disappeared when the last of the heretics left the surface of the world. I looked down on my brother, the only other to survive, even briefly. He was choking blood when I took his hand in mine and looked into his eyes as they grew cold. As his light departed, another entered, and there I saw him, in the eyes of my departed brother. I saw him, the Sanguinor, its death mask reflecting the perfection of our Lord's face. As if he stood over my shoulder and was a mere reflection. But there was no light on the face of the Marine, no light on my hands that held him, just a light in the now dead eyes. And we looked at each other, he and I, the Sanguinor, and I understood. I knew. He inclined his head, for he could see the realization on my face. I knew. And at that point, the image began to fade, the light dimmed. He had saved me today. He had come when all was lost. He had saved me. But there would be a cost. For one day, I would repay this bounty. One day, I would repay it in spades. That was then. This is now. And as we approach the planet, our destination, I am forced to ask myself again, as always, will it be here? Is this my last campaign? Will I repay my debt on this Abundance Tertius? Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be discussing an enigma of the setting, one that none can truly button down to one category or another. It is a being of power that can appear near anywhere, unbidden, but not unwanted. Its appearance always changes the course of a battle, but only the ones with such import that they dictate the fate of entire systems and sectors. A being of pure light that is both hope and inspiration manifest, but also vengeance personified. Of course, I can only be speaking of that legend connected to the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels. Aye, for today we shall be discussing the Sanguinor. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Sanguinor. The Sanguinor, also known as the Exemplar of the Host, is a mysterious entity of unknown origin that is associated with the Blood Angel Space Marines chapter, and has been named after Sanguinius, the Blood Angel's martyred Primarch. Not much is known about his origins, and what information does exist is really nothing more than speculation by the chapter's librarian and several Imperial scholars well versed in the lore of the Adeptus Astartes. The Sanguinor often appears during the Blood Angel's periods of greatest need, usually during a combat situation. To many among the battle brothers of the chapter, he is no more than a myth, as few ever survive the battles where he has manifested. But the initiates of the Blood's Reclusium know better, having kept detailed records of his manifestations down through the centuries. While the Sanguinor's deeds are unquestioned, there has always been much debate concerning his origin and identity. The members of the Blood Angels Chapter Council argued that the Sanguinor is the manifestation of Sanguinius' own better nature, his nobility that kept his darkness in check, lost to the chapter with his death at the hands of Horus aboard the War Master's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, during the climax of the Siege of Terra. The Sanguinary Guard do not believe that the Sanguinor is the chapter's Primarch, but that he is Askelon, the original founder of the Sanguinary Guard, who has been preserved beyond time by the divine will of the Emperor. So great is the Sanguinor's legend that it has long passed beyond the Blood Angels chapter, and has served to exacerbate the discomfort felt towards the Blood Angels by certain sections of the Imperium. The Inquisition savants have their own opinions about the matter, theorizing that the Sanguinor is some sort of psychic construct, born of the warp through the collective desires and needs of Blood Angel Space Marines when groups of them are under extreme duress. Others hold that he is an empiric manifestation of some darker sort. This only further supports the beliefs of some members of the Inquisition that the Blood Angels as a chapter have come perilously close to mutation, corruption, and ultimately, heresy. Whatever the reality of the matter, the Sanguinor is an honored part of the heritage of the Blood Angels chapter, as integral to their identities as servants of the Emperor of Mankind as the rest of their traditions and rituals, an honored figure of hope in a time of darkness and woe. History. None know from where the Sanguinor comes, yet there are two credible possibilities put forward by the Blood Angels. The first is that the Sanguinor is the last member of the Blood Angels Sanguinary Guard to have survived the Horus heresy. Askelon, although this seems implausible, even with the long lifespans granted to Space Marines by their genetic alterations. The second, a more widely accepted possibility, is that when the Primarch Sanguinius was slain by Horus, his soul split in two. That half which was full of anguish, pain, and doubt over his actions during the Horus heresy became the flaws that tortured the Blood Angels to this day, while that part which was noble and righteous formed into the Sanguinor within the Immaterium. However the Sanguinor came into existence, the Blood Angels of the present day always see his coming as a harbinger of hope and the Emperor's divine will. Origins. The role of Sanguinor began during the tumultuous days of the Horus heresy, following the horrific events of the Battle of Kalth and the Dropsite massacre of Istvan V. Primarch Reboot Guilliman of the Ultramarines Legion knew that the light of the great navigational beacon of the Astronomicon was extinguished across half the galaxy through the efforts of the Word-Bearers Legion's maleficent summoning of the massive warp storm known as the Ruin Storm. Cut off from the rest of the Imperium and unable to firmly establish whether or not the Emperor of Mankind was still even alive, or if Terra and the Imperium of Man had fallen to the traitors, Guilliman instituted the ultimate contingency plan: to create a second Imperium in order to ensure the survival of the Emperor's dream of a united mankind. This second Imperium became known as Imperium Secundus. Due to the Ruin Storm, warp travel had proved erratic at best and deadly at worst. The Ruin Storm was not only dangerous because of the powerful warp turbulences it unleashed, but because it occluded the light of the Astronomicon, and thus rendered navigators practically blind. Macragge was the only known exception to this, as it had been, for lack of the better word, lit up by the Xenos artifact known as the Pharos, located beneath the largest peak of the world of Sotha. With this new psychic beacon, the light of the Pharos drew many remnants of the shattered legions, those few pitiful loyalist survivors of the Dropsite massacre of Istvan V, to the refuge and relative safety of Macragge. This beacon also brought forth the expeditionary fleet of the First Legion of Lion L. Johnson, which had been crusading in the Thramas system. Reboot Guilliman proposed that the Lion take up the mantle of the new regent of the Imperium Secundus, rather than himself. But in the end, with the arrival of their brother Sanguinius and his Blood Angels Legion from their disastrous campaign in the Cygnus cluster, Guilliman convinced his reluctant brother Primarch to rule as the regent of Imperium Secundus, for Sanguinius possessed more of the noble aspects of the Emperor within him than either Guilliman or the Lion. With Sanguinius as acting regent, there was always the prevalent fear of assassination, as agents of the War Master Horus had already attempted to assassinate Guilliman. Fearing for his safety, Sanguinius wasn't allowed to make public appearances. Ascalon, leader of the Primarch's Sanguinary Guard, convinced his sire to allow a herald to speak on their lord's behalf. Acquiescing to Ascalon's request, 10 Sanguinary Guard were gathered to draw lots, 2 of which were marked in blood. The 8 who did not win were dismissed. The remaining 2, Alatron and Haratial, had their lots placed within a grail, and one was picked at random. Alatron's name was selected. In order to maintain the identity of Sanguinius's newly appointed herald from any possible penetration by the enemy, Ascalon summarily executed Haratial. Ascalon then drew a white-hot, artificer-crafted helm shaped in the visage of Sanguinius's face from a fire, and placed it upon Halatron's head, forever searing the helm to his flesh, and ensuring forevermore that Alatron would remain anonymous as he assumed his new identity as a so-called Sanguinor. It is not known if Alatron survived the heresy, and what role he played, if any, following the death of Sanguinius at the hands of Horus during the Siege of Terra, and the subsequent division of the Blood Angels Legion into separate chapters during the Second Founding. Furthermore, it is not known if the current Sanguinor is the same being as the original, or a new phenomenon, totally unrelated to the Sanguinor, who served as the original herald of Sanguinius during the heresy. Notable appearances. The Sanguinor rarely appears on the field of battle, only arriving when the Blood Angels are in dire need of his aid. The Sanguinor will not simply use his power to provide an instant victory. but he will aid the Blood Angels in carrying out combat tasks that without his aid would simply have been impossible to achieve. Over the millennia, the records of his appearances illustrate he has never provided his aid to the chapter lightly, and will not appear just because some angels face difficulties in combat. The situation must be both dire and of great import to both the chapter and the Imperium itself before the Sanguinor will manifest. Fall of the Terraclaw. Perhaps one of the most famous of all the Sanguinor's appearances, and most readily recounted, is the legend of the assault upon the Night Lord's battle barge, Terraclaw. 12 battle brothers were ordered to strike at the Terraclaw, to slay its master, as penance for unrecorded transgressions. No one expected them to succeed, for they were outnumbered several hundred times over. Yet the Sanguinor seemingly saw merit in their task, and joined the fight at the moment their boarding torpedo crashed through the battle barge's hull. Pausing only to grant his blessings to the sergeant in command of his sortie, he cut a bloody path across the Terraclaw, blazing through the vessel like the wrath of Sanguinius himself. Tellingly, the Sanguinor's actions that day did not grant his penitent battle brothers an easy victory. Though their passage to the command deck was made upon the carpet of dismembered bodies and severed limbs left in the Sanguinor's wake, the Blood Angels had to fight every step of the way against a crew of heretic Astartes, themselves now hungry for vengeance. Though the quest was ultimately a success, and the captain of the Terraclaw slain, only the sergeant survived and returned to Baal. The Sanguinor did therefore not accomplish the quest for his battle brothers, but through his merit and wrath, he did render the impossible possible. The Kartas Incident. In the year 823 Millennium 41, Captain Zoriel led elements of the Blood Angels' 4th Company to the world of Kartas, there to put an end to localized acts of piracy by a ragtag fleet of orc renegades. Though the pirate fleet was quickly shattered, their flagship broke up in the Kartan atmosphere, raining its wreckage across the planet. The ship's warp core suffered a cascade failure and tore a hole in reality through which poured a host of cornate demons. The Blood Angels, who had made planetfall to check for pirate survivors, soon found themselves stranded on Kartas, surrounded by an ever-growing tide of demons. Though they fought with honor and determination, Sanguinius' sons were soon in danger of being overrun. Their predicament worsened when the mighty bloodthirster Kabanda, the greater demon who once bested Sanguinius himself, came forth and faced only 30 remaining Blood Angels and their valiant commander. Kabanda proceeded to slay Captain Zoriel in single combat. Soon Kabanda's hordes of cornate lesser demons proceeded to attack the remaining Astartes. Kabanda spread his massive bat-like wings wide and attacked the strongest point of the Marines' defense, 5 tactical Marines who holed up in a ruined cathedral dedicated to the Emperor. But it was then that, like the divine hand of the Emperor himself, the Sanguinor appeared from nowhere and plunged like a bolt of gold lightning into the midst of the foe. The angel battled the roaring demon back and forth. A great duel ensued between the angel and demon, in which neither could gain the upper hand, though the Sanguinor subsequently broke the infernal beast's potent cornate battle-axe. Then Sanguinor stabbed the demon with his sword and, using his jump pack, rose high up into the sky, taking the demon with him. When the Sanguinor had reached the apogee of his flight, many thousands of meters above the surface of Kartas, he released the impotent flailing demon, which hurled down to the ground and dug a crater into the sod filled with demonic gore. As Kabanda's spirit was banished to the warp for 1,000 standard years. Shortly afterwards, the Space Marines destroyed the Orc's malfunctioning warp core and slew the remaining demons of Khorne. When the Blood Angel Storm Ravens finally arrived at Kartas to recover the surviving Astartes after receiving their distress signal, only 6 battle brothers had survived, and the Sanguinor had vanished to wherever he had come. End quote. Now there are huge tracts of information in the entire Baal campaign, where a Tyranid Hive fleet near wiped the Blood Angels from the galaxy. But for that, we shall await another entry. It's a bit of a whopper of a topic, you see, so I don't think it should be rushed. Apologies, I am still reading round it. The Sanguinor is an anomaly, but of a type that is becoming all too prevalent now that the prophesied psychic awakening has occurred. Like many others, I do not believe that the Sanguinor is some eternal member of the Sanguinary Guard. His feats are too great. His longevity, impossible. I lean more towards believing he is a psychic emanation, more like an imperial demon, akin to the Legion of the Damned or the Living Saints. As stated, he could well be the gestalt psychic might of the Blood Angels, who were ever one of the most psychically gifted legions. But in truth, do we really need to know? Sometimes I like there to be a mystery. I think it adds so much to the setting for us to not know everything. So we can discuss, theorize, confabulate about it, argue about it, one of the most gripping elements of the hobby to many. So if the Sanguinor is an ancient warrior, the better part of the soul of Sanguinius, the collected power of his sons, or a being sent by the Emperor himself to aid one of his most trusted and adored legions, it is at this present moment impossible for me to say. And for that, this time, I am very grateful indeed. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the Sanguinor. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, but not until after Crimbo, or any other festive period, because that would just be silly. Get your family and friends gifts first, please. Or give the video a share. Now that's free, and that would be much welcomed. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.